Hello, you're watching Sky News. It is 12 o'clock. We are waiting for the Prime Minister's questions to begin very shortly. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, joins me in our Westminster studio. Beth, the Prime Minister is already on his feet. We'll speak to you in a short while.
Communities across the United Kingdom have been hit hard by Storm Eowyn. I spoke with the leaders of the devolved administrations in Scotland and Northern Ireland over the weekend to work with them on support that's required and to pay tribute to all those responding on the front line. Mr. Speaker, kick-starting economic growth is the #1 mission of this government, to put more money in people's pockets and deliver on our plan for change. Today, the Chancellor announced our next steps to deliver the plan for change. A new Oxford-Cambridge corridor, redeveloping Old Trafford and supporting a new runway at Heathrow. We're removing the barriers to investment, supporting innovation and going further and faster to boost growth. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Mr. Speaker, this April the state pension will increase by £470 and over the course of this Parliament by up to £1,900, benefiting millions of pensioners. Does the Prime Minister agree that means testing the state pension would do severe harm? And will he confirm that this government will always protect the state pension and the triple lock?
Let me be absolutely clear, Mr. Speaker. There will be no means testings of the state pension under this Labour government. We're committed both to the triple lock and to the principle that people should receive pension based on their contribution, regardless of their wealth. And he's right to say 12 million pensioners receiving £470 increase in April. And when people like the Leader of the Opposition say they want means testing, that means a cut. The difference is they cut pensions, we're increasing them.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, may I take this opportunity to solemnly commemorate the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. And we remember the 6 million Jewish men, women and children who were murdered. The Holocaust stands as a unique evil in human history. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the Prime Minister set his growth test. He said, if a policy is good for growth, the answer is yes. If it's not, the answer is no. This morning, the Chancellor embraced a series of Conservative policies. Although many are welcomed, they will take years to deliver. Mr. Speaker, when Conservatives left office, we had the fastest economic growth in the G7. But what is the government doing for growth now? It's destroying it. Let's look at the employment bill. The government's own figures say it will cost business £5 billion a year. It clearly fails the Prime Minister's growth test. Will he drop it?
Mr. Speaker, I think the proposition they left a golden inheritance was tested on the 4th of July, which is why they're standing there. But she asked what we're doing. The ONS say we've got the highest investment for 19 years. PwC, second best place to invest in the world. IMF upgrading growth, predicted fastest growing major economy in Europe. Wages up, inflation down. Mr. Speaker, there's more to do. We're reforming planning and regulation, building the new homes that we need, supporting a third runway at Heathrow. And as she admitted to the CBI in November, there's no point me just complaining about Labour, she said. It's obvious that we Conservatives lost the confidence of business. We're not taking lectures from them.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't want to talk about the employment bill because he doesn't know about it. Last week, he misled the House. He was not on top of his own education bill, listening to
Sorry. We can't accuse the Prime Minister of misleading the House. No. But he can't do it. I'm sure there's words that you would prefer to use.
Mr. Speaker, last week he claimed to have laid down an amendment that he had not made. He doesn't know what is going on in here or out there. Last week, I spoke to a woman running a business in Exeter. She is terrified of taking on new staff. She is struggling to keep her head above water, dreading what this government will do next. She's not alone. The Federation of Small Businesses says 92% of small employers are concerned about the employment bill. Clauses 1 through 6 make it harder for business to hire new employees, often young people looking for their first job. This isn't an employment bill, it's an unemployment bill. Given these clauses, will he drop his bill and show that he is not anti-growth?
Mr. Speaker, we believe in giving people proper dignity and protection at work. That's why we're proud of our record supporting workers. They consistently vote against any protection for working people. And her consistent refrain is that there should be less. But, Mr. Speaker, we are driving growth on behalf of working people. Work rights are consistent with growth. Every good business knows that. And on top of the planning reform, the building of houses, supporting aviation, the Chancellor this morning spoke of the Oxford-Cambridge growth corridor, redeveloping Old Trafford, and manufacturing at East Midlands Airport. We want to grow the economy. The only policy she's got is to shrink pensions.
Mr. Speaker, all his ideas are the ones that we thought of. He needs to make sure that we deliver for growth now as well as the future. To grow our economy, we must get more people off sickness and welfare and into work. Clauses 8 and 9 of the unemployment bill take us in the opposite direction by increasing entitlements. His government itself estimates that these changes will increase business costs from £600 million to £1 billion a year in sick pay. That will mean higher prices, fewer jobs, less growth. Will he drop these measures from the bill?
No, Mr. Speaker, I think they're good for workers and good for growth. This is the same argument they made against the minimum wage and every protection for workers. And she says they're their ideas. Mr. Speaker, she says she's in support of a third runway at Heathrow. Her shadow transport secretary says that it would be calamitous. The shadow business secretary is busy writing letters opposing airport expansion in his own backyard. Shadow chief secretary says the Oxford-Cambridge idea is flawed and he's against it. We're the coalition of builders, they're the coalition of blockers.
Mr. Speaker, he forgets his own Chancellor blocked an airport in her constituency. They are hypocrites, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about this employment bill. Part 1 of the bill means a new employee could start a job in the morning and take their employer to a tribunal that afternoon. It is no wonder that this bill has been called an adventure playground for lawyers. This bill is terrible for business, but it is great employment for lawyers. I know the Prime Minister loves the legal profession, but he needs to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader. This is another measure in the bill that fails his growth test. Will he show some leadership and drop it?
Mr. Speaker, I understand she likes straight talking. She's talking absolute nonsense. She knows, and anybody who understands anything about the bill or any employment law will know you can't start in the morning and go to the tribunal in the afternoon. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know she's not a lawyer. She's clearly not a leader. If she keeps on like this, she is going to be the next lettuce.
Mr. Speaker, he does not know what his bill is doing. He should listen to business who are terrified of this bill. The only workers he cares about are lawyers, but it is not just lawyers benefiting from this bill. Who else benefits? It's not taxpayers. They will be paying for even more welfare. It's not young workers. They won't get their first break. It's definitely not businesses. They are being hammered with yet more burdens. Who benefits, Mr. Speaker? Who benefits? It's the trade unions. It's the trade unions. Part 4 of the unemployment bill, Part 4, they haven't read it, Part 4 of the unemployment bill is the biggest expansion of trade union powers for a generation. Exactly. Thank you. The public will have heard them cheer. Rather than deregulating for business who create growth, he's deregulating for the unions. Yep. Clause 61 alone reduces the notice period for strikes to just 1 week. Given strikes are catastrophic for growth, will he drop Part 4 of the bill?
Mr. Mr. Speaker, it's good for working people and it's good for the economy. And she should keep up. The CBI have welcomed our positive steps this morning. Their quotes. The Chancellor's just given a brilliant speech on the economy, fixing the mess they left and growing our economy. CBI said they celebrate their positive leadership, a clear vision to kickstart our economy. That's the difference. We're growing the economy. They left it in a complete mess.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, the arrogance of the Prime Minister is that he thinks that it's his government that creates growth. He's wrong. It is business that creates growth. Our economy is built by entrepreneurs, risk takers, and the hard graft of working people. They know that you can't tax your way to growth. You can't borrow your way to growth. You can't legislate your way to growth. Other countries are serious about freeing business from red tape. President Trump is doing it in America. Argentina is taking a chainsaw to regulations. Even the EU is not going as far as this left-wing government. This bill will put us at the bottom of the pack. Add it to the jobs tax, the family business tax. It's no wonder wealth creators are fleeing Britain in droves. The Chancellor is desperately trying to save her reputation. She knows Labour have damaged growth. This bill manifestly fails the Prime Minister's own growth test. If he won't drop the unemployment bill, what is the point of his growth test?
She's got a nerve. They broke the economy, completely destroyed it. They broke the health service, completely destroyed it. They've ruined us on prisons and everything else you could mention. They failed on every front. They're in no position to give us lectures on anything. And she says that she accepts they failed. They're changing. They've learnt absolutely nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the government's action last week to tackle rogue traders who installed faulty home insulation, affecting many of my Luton South and South Bedfordshire constituents. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that Labour's Warm Homes plan will tackle fuel poverty and bring down bills for families as part of our plan for change?
Well, I thank her for that question. The party opposite have got a lot to answer for in the failing system that they've left behind. We've taken immediate action to ensure consumers insulating their homes are not let down again. We're investing £3.4 billion through our Warm Homes plan to upgrade 5 million homes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I take this opportunity to thank the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust for all their work in commemorating the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, and say what a privilege it was to meet Holocaust survivors at their Guildhall event. When the honourable member, my honourable friend for North Devon, and I recently visited a hospital in Barnstaple, a surgeon there told us that it was like a ticking time bomb. He explained that a hospital that size needs 12 operating theatres to meet demand. They've got just 4. The last Conservative government promised to rebuild it, and we all know that was a hollow promise. Now, the North Devon District Hospital is one of 9 across the country where their urgent rebuild programme has now been postponed for over 10 years. So will the Prime Minister meet honourable members whose constituents' lives are being harmed by this delay to see if there's any way we can bring these urgent projects forward?
Well, can I join him in his comments about the Holocaust survivors that we met earlier this week? It was incredibly moving, as it always is, and I was struck by the fact that there were so many in the gathering that we were at, and we're unlikely to see so many in one place like that again, and we must never, ever forget. On the question of hospitals, look, I think people across the country are right to feel angry and betrayed and frustrated at the last government's non-plan on hospitals. It was unachievable, it was unfunded, it was empty promises. Under them, these hospitals would never have been built. Our funded plan, backed by the investment we've put in, will deliver them. We will take such steps as we can on hubs, etc., to advance quickly on waiting lists and operations, as he knows, and I'm more than happy to talk or to make sure that all constituents and members can meet relevant ministers.
David.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Prime Minister told me that it was going to take 3 years before social care reforms could be implemented. Now he's saying that urgent hospital rebuilds are going to take more than a decade. My honourable friends and I will keep coming back to this issue. If I can turn to economic growth, the Chancellor has now admitted that we need to go further and faster in the pursuit of economic growth, and we agree. But the Prime Minister knows we believe that means setting aside his objections to a UK-EU customs union so our country can go further and faster in rebuilding our trading relationships with our European neighbours, especially with the threat to world trade posed by Trump's tariffs and Trump's trade wars. But if he won't change his mind today on a customs union, when he goes to Brussels on Monday, will he confirm to the House that he will open negotiations for the UK to join the Pan-Euro-Mediterranean Convention so we can start removing the growth-damaging trade barriers set up by the Conservatives?
Our number one mission is growth. That's why we've set out all the initiatives over the last 7 months, particularly the ones this morning. He knows, in relation to the reset with the EU, which we're determined to achieve, that we have clear red lines when it comes to the single market and the customs union. So he knows where we stand on that.
Debbie Abraham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today's Joseph Rowntree Foundation report on UK poverty not only highlights who is most likely to be poor, but also the scale and increase in deep and enduring poverty. I was encouraged by the Prime Minister's response to me before Christmas at the Liaison Committee, where he explained and acknowledged that disabled people experience poverty because of their extra costs, and that while over 2 million disabled people can and want to work, many others cannot and should receive adequate support. Many vulnerable claimants are worried following speculation that the £3 billion of savings to be found in the Social Security budget may impact on their disability benefits. Will my right honourable friend agree with me that language matters and that their concerns must be heard?
Well, I thank you for raising this, and I know it's an issue that she's deeply concerned about and campaigns on. The rise in poverty, Mr. Speaker, caused by the mismanagement of the economy by the party opposite is unacceptable. Our approach to social security will ensure that work is accessible to as many people as possible as a route out of poverty. Mr. Speaker, that includes the new Connect to Work programme, expected to help 100,000 disabled people find and stay in work.
Gavin Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, may I firstly thank the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster for their sterling support over the last number of days for Northern Ireland in the aftermath of Storm AO, and it's greatly appreciated and demonstrates how well the Union works. Mr. Speaker, on the 15th of August 1998, the fragility of peace in Northern Ireland was shattered when the real IRA detonated a bomb in Omagh town. 29 people died and a further 2 unborn twins never saw this world. Through the dignity and the stoic campaigning of Michael Gallagher, whose son Aidan died, a public inquiry was secured through the courts, who recommended in 2021 that the Irish government should similarly hold an inquiry to understand what could have been prevented, given the cross-border nature of this atrocity. The bomb was prepared in the Irish Republic and transported from the Irish Republic. Will he use his good offices to ensure that truth is delivered and justice arrives for the families of those who so needlessly lost their lives from Irish Republican terrorism?
First, on the question of the storm, can I assure him that we will continue to work with the leaders in Northern Ireland to ensure that we deal with what was really devastating in Northern Ireland for very many people still without power and all the associated problems that are associated with that. In relation to the Omagh bombing inquiry, I thank him for raising this. It was a heinous and cowardly terrorist attack, and it shocked the world. Our thoughts are with the family members now taking part in commemorative hearings this week. I do welcome the Irish Government's commitment to cooperate with the inquiry. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland has raised with the Irish Government the importance of working together on addressing these and all legacy issues, and I'm grateful for him for raising this very serious and important issue.
Jack Abbott.
Mr Speaker, the Ipswich Northern Bypass is a project of local, regional and national importance, one on which the future of our town and county hinges. But this critical project has been gathering dust for years, repeatedly blocked by people who refuse to act in our long-term interests. The Prime Minister has set out how our government will back the builders over the blockers. Will he now back the builders in my town and make this a project of national significance through our plan for change?
Well, he's been relentless in seeking to boost growth and investment in Ipswich and Suffolk, and the gridlock his constituents face underlines the failure of the party opposite to deal with this when they had the chance to do so. Mr Speaker, we will fast-track decisions on at least 150 major economic infrastructure projects to kick-start growth, and I will make sure he gets a meeting with the relevant minister to discuss the issues of concern to him.
In room.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As my right honourable friend said earlier, last week North Devon District Hospital got the devastating news that investment would be delayed 10 years beyond 2035. In the 5 years since the last government's empty promises, our hospital's maintenance backlog has grown to over £40 million. Given that £200 million has reportedly been spent just on consultancy fees for the new hospital programme, what funding for extra maintenance will be available for those hospitals that now face another decade of waiting?
I thank him for raising this, and his constituents will be angry and frustrated at the empty, unfunded promises left by the Conservatives. Let's be clear, under their non-plan, North Devon District Hospital would simply not have been delivered. It's not been delayed, it was never going to be delivered, and they know it, he knows it, his constituents know it. We have put in place a funded, deliverable plan that will see the hospital built, and will work closely with the Trust to accelerate work. And the party opposite really owe his constituents an apology.
Deirdre Cosson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Children in Ealing Southall will be sleeping on sofas and on living room floors tonight due to 14 years of failure from the Conservatives. Ealing Council has joined over 100 councils trying to remove the barriers to give these kids a decent home to live in, something the party opposite don't seem to care about. As part of the government's plan for change, will the Prime Minister look at the 5 solutions put forward by these councils so we can secure the future of council housing for those children sleeping on the floor tonight?
Well, she's right to raise this very serious issue. We are committed to working with every council to deliver the biggest increase in social and affordable housing in a generation. We're immediately taking action to reform the right to buy, to enable councils to borrow more cheaply, and investing in affordable homes programme.
Paul Kohler.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I entered politics, active politics, after an attack in my home was misused by others to promote their anti-EU, anti-immigrant agenda. My life was saved by 2 brave police officers from Wimbledon Police Station. As a family, our lives were transformed by a restorative justice session organised by the charity Why Me, where we met one of my 4 attackers in prison. Will the Prime Minister meet with me to discuss how his government can give restorative justice greater emphasis and put victims at the centre of the criminal justice system, reduce recidivism and cut crime and costs?
Can I send my sympathy for what the honourable member experienced? It must have had a profound impact on him and, of course, on his family. I too have seen the power of restorative justice, which does enable victims to receive answers, and perpetrators have to face the human cost of their crimes. Under the Victims Code, all adult victims must be told about restorative justice and how to access it. We can always do more, and I'll ensure that he gets the meeting that he wants with the relevant minister.
Charters.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm pleased to announce that this summer I'll be going on paternity leave again for baby number 2. And may I congratulate the Secretary of State for Scotland on his new arrival. The Chancellor spoke brilliantly this morning on growth, and I'm pleased to reveal that new JRF research shows that by increasing paternity leave, we could increase economic growth by £2.6 billion a year. So can I ask the Prime Minister, will he review statutory paternity leave? and from one father to another. Will he meet with me and the dad shift to support and discuss how we can support new parents?
Well, can I wish him and his wife all well with their new arrival? We are conducting a review into parental leave because you can't grow the economy if parents have to choose between work and their children. And thanks to the Employment Rights Bill, which they oppose opposite, 30,000 more fathers will get paternity leave. And that's the difference, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition wants to roll back parental rights. We're extending them.
Duffield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since 2012, the Drax power station has been given £7 billion of green subsidies by the government for burning 27 million trees per year. That's enough money for 5 years of pensioners' winter fuel payments. While Ofgem has been asleep at the wheel, a recent KPMG report has concluded that Drax claimed those subsidies illegally. Will the Prime Minister today demand to see that KPMG report before giving another £1 of taxpayers' money to Drax?
Thank you for raising this. It is an important issue. Of course, we will look at the report, but I don't join in her description. We will look at the report.
Midday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you well know, Lancashire is a wonderful county full of great businesses and hard-working people. But for too long, we've been held back by an outdated two-tier council system. The government's English devolution bill is a massive opportunity for us to get back in the fast lane and catch up with the likes of Manchester and Liverpool. So will the Prime Minister join with me in calling on all Lancashire leaders to work together in the interests of our residents, putting aside political differences and self-interests, and move forward in good faith to unleash Lancashire's huge potential?
Well, he, of course, has given decades of service to his community, Mr. Speaker. I'm a firm believer in moving power out of Westminster into the hands of those with skin in the game. That's how you boost growth, create opportunities and drive reform. I'm pleased that we're establishing a combined county authority in Lancashire. Our ambition is for mayors across all areas of England who can take advantage of the powers set out in the devolution white paper, including in Lancashire.
Clive Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I declare my interest as the Governor of the Royal Berkshire Hospital and a family member has shares in the medical company. In the gallery today are patients who use the Royal Berkshire Hospital. Parts of its estate are crumbling as we speak, and it urgently needs a rebuild, but we're going to have to wait until at least 2037. Can the Prime Minister please explain to these visitors and the House why he thinks that it is acceptable that staff and patients dodge buckets collecting rainwater from leaking roofs for another 18 years? And will he meet with them and explain it to them face to face?
Well, I'm grateful to him for raising this on behalf of his constituents. So I speak, obviously, to them, and his constituents will hear the answer. There wasn't a plan for this building. It was a pretend plan. It was a fiction. It was unfunded and it was undeliverable. It only existed in the head of Boris Johnson. And they're the frustration for his constituents, and I really understand it. They thought, because they were promised, that they were going to get something which the party opposite knew was never going to be delivered. That is absolutely unforgivable. We will pick that up. We've put in place a funded scheme to build as quickly as we can, but it's got to be funded, it's got to be deliverable. That's the difference between the approach that we're taking and the approach that they took. And of course I'll make sure a relevant minister meets with him and his constituents in order to explain that more fully to them.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In China, DeepSeek has developed an AI model almost as good as the most advanced technology from OpenAI. In the US, they're investing up to $500 billion in building out data centres. Now, to build data centres, you need two things: lots of energy and ideally cold weather. Fortunately, Scotland has both of those in abundance. So will the Prime Minister back Glasgow being an AI growth zone to help bring investment and solidify the UK's place as the third largest AI market on earth?
Well, I thank my honourable friend. What a contrast, the SNP, a strong Labour voice championing economic growth in Scotland. The AI developments this week show why we're right to put artificial intelligence at the heart of our plan for change. We've already secured £39 billion of AI investment, which will create 13,000 jobs across the UK. I agree with him that Scotland has real potential for AI growth zones. I'll make sure that he gets to meet with the relevant minister to discuss.
John Milne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency of Horsham, my local council faces a £500,000 tax bill from the rise in national insurance, and my local hospice, St Catherine's, has had to mothball a brand new ward. What message does the Prime Minister have for all the public services that are outright losers at the hands of the very tax that's supposed to save them?
Well, I'm grateful for him for raising this, as he knows the settlement to local councils was an increase this year, so they have more money to deal with the problems they face. They were underfunded, broken by the last government. We've now put that support, that funding in place. That's the right thing to do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It was such great news when the government decided that it was right to pay compensation to the LGBT veterans who'd unfairly lost their jobs. But unfortunately, they're not alone. There are others who've been prepared to lay down their lives on behalf of the country who have also been treated disgracefully. I include in that list my constituent who was sacked from MI6 simply for being gay. Would my right honourable friend please commit to righting that wrong and for meeting my constituent?
Well, I'm grateful to her raising this really important issue. All those who serve our country deserve our fullest respect and gratitude. Mr. Speaker, that's why we're righting the historic wrongs inflicted on LGBT veterans, already significantly increasing compensation available and enabling them to get their ranks restored. I know the issue she's raised is of real issue to the Foreign Secretary. He's looking at it, and I'll make sure she gets to talk to him about it, but we do need to deal with this historic injustice. She's right about that.
Jim Allister.
Thank you. Given the strategic commitment to Irish unity in the programme for government of the new government in Dublin, can I ask the Prime Minister whether he and his government have a strategic and economic interest in retaining Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom? And if they do, why then is he continuing with a system whereby, in over 300 areas of law in the economic sphere, Northern Ireland is subject not to UK law, but to the same laws that apply in the Irish Republic, laws we don't make and can't change?
Mr. Speaker, we're proud of and totally committed to the Good Friday Agreement. And Northern Ireland matters to this government. It matters to me. He will know I worked there for 5 years with the police service in Northern Ireland. I want to see Northern Ireland secure, safe for all communities and thriving in the future. And I believe that it can be, and we'll be doing everything to make sure that it does.
Elvin Bailey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow marks the 20th anniversary of the loss of Royal Air Force aircraft X-Ray Victor 179 and the 10 UK service personnel that were killed on board. Known to their friends as Steady, Smudge, Gary Nick, Pards, Gibbo, Richie, Bob, Dave, Jonesy and Paddy. These people were killed on a routine flight between Baghdad and Balad as a result of a poorly protected aircraft. This was the largest single loss of life in the Iraq War. Would the Prime Minister join with me to thank and recognise our service personnel for their service and their sacrifice, and the stoicism of their family as we join to commemorate such a tragic moment?
Well, I thank him for reminding the House of this case, and I know that condolences of the whole House remain with the families of these brave soldiers. We will never forget the vital role they played to support the coalition operation in Iraq. Can I thank him and pay tribute to his service? We are immensely proud of our armed forces and their courage and dedication as they keep our country safe.
Sir Jeremy Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister may know that this time last week,
representatives of those who've been injured seriously by COVID vaccines were giving evidence to the COVID inquiry, including my constituent Kate Scott. I hope he also knows that the compensation available to those people isn't adequate and isn't adequately accessible. I'm grateful to the Health Secretary for the thought I know he is giving to how that position may be remedied. But can I ask the Prime Minister to give his personal support to that objective? Not just because it's the right thing to do for the people affected, but also because it will support the objective we should all share to maintain public confidence in vaccination.
Well, thank you for raising this, and as he says, the Health Secretary is looking at it, and I can assure him I will also look at it with the Health Secretary, and we will get back to him as we do so.
Rachel Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, I heard a story from an elderly resident in Bedworth. Colin Basra phoned the GP surgery to make an appointment for his elderly wife and was told no appointments would be available for 3 months. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this is utterly shocking and horrifying and is a direct result of 14 years of neglect by the party opposite?
I thank her for raising it. She's right to raise it. She's absolutely right. The damage they did to the NHS was absolutely unforgivable. We are taking steps to make sure more GP appointments will be available. We're getting the waiting list down. We're putting the investment in the NHS. As with everything else, we're clearing up the mess that they left behind.
Final question, Andrew Rosender.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister should know that my constituents in Romford are shocked, angry and dismayed by the suggestion by the ONS that the population of this country will rise to 72.5 million by 2032. Mr. Speaker, that's 500,000 people a year, which is unsustainable. Who voted for that? And will the government do something to ensure that the population of this country is sustainable going forward? Because there is no mandate for such a colossal increase in immigration in this country.
I think he should talk to his leader. Because net migration went through the roof under the last government, nearly 1 million, quadrupled. And who was cheering it on? Who was cheering it on? The leader of the opposition. His constituents are right to be concerned about the loss of control by the last government. We're taking control. We will bring these numbers down. But the record is absolutely clear, and it sits right there.
That completes Prime Minister's questions. We'll let the front bench change over.
Well, it does complete Prime Minister's questions. We'll be talking to our political editor, Beth Rigby, in a short moment. But first, let's just bring you a bit of breaking news that happened while we were watching Prime Minister's questions. Lloyds Bank has announced it's to shut 136 more high street branches as it says it accelerates plans to cut costs and digitise the bank. It's going to close 61 Lloyds, 61 Halifax and 14 Bank of Scotland branches between May this year and March next year. And, of course, it comes just a week after Lloyds shook up its branch business to allow people from Lloyds, Halifax and Bank of Scotland to use stores across any of those branches for banking. It is blaming customers for shifting away from banking in person to using mobile phone services. I'm sure a lot of customers will be watching this and saying that they have to use the mobile services because there aren't any branches where they live. But we'll get in reaction to that, I'm sure, throughout the afternoon here on Sky. Well, let's talk to our political editor, Beth Rigby, who joins me here in the studio. I'm afraid that we're now going to take a ministerial statement from the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Darren Jones, on the state of the economy.
It will mean that we can't cut NHS waiting lists or rebuild our schools or put more police on our streets. This is why our pursuit of growth is our first mission, putting our country on a new path towards a brighter future after 14 years of failure from the Conservatives. By helping businesses to invest and create wealth, they can provide jobs and opportunities that change lives, putting more pounds in people's pockets and rejuvenating communities across the country. And we have seen progress here already, Mr. Speaker, with huge private sector investments into our country since this government came into service. But now we must go faster and we must go further. We must help businesses and places to achieve their potential. And we do this by being an active and strategic state. one that works in true partnership with businesses, investors and local leaders to deliver for the British people in every corner of the country. This principle was at the heart of the Chancellor's speech earlier today in Oxfordshire, where she announced the latest steps this government is taking to drive growth across the country. And I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, to update the House on these announcements now. The economic growth that we are pursuing, Mr. Speaker, must reach into every town, city and community across the United Kingdom. Inclusive growth for everyone, not just for those at the top. Because there is untapped talent and unrealised opportunity throughout the country, and we cannot let that go to waste any longer. If we can raise the productivity of major cities like Manchester, Birmingham and Leeds just to the national average, then we will deliver an extra £33 billion in economic output. So I can confirm that our plans for regional growth will be hardwired into the spending review, into the infrastructure strategy, into the industrial strategy and into our approach to trade and investment. We are already providing £200 million of funding to support development of a new mass transit system in West Yorkshire. And at the autumn budget, we secured improved connections between towns and cities from Manchester through to York. And we are developing our plans to further improve connectivity in the north and across the country through our 10-year infrastructure strategy, which will set out our long-term vision for social and economic infrastructure across the country. Today, Mr. Speaker, we are progressing with the Wrexham and Flintshire Investment Zone, focusing on the area's incredible strengths in advanced manufacturing to leverage in £1 billion of private investment and to create up to 6,000 new jobs. As the Chancellor announced at Davos last week, the Office for Investment will work hand in hand with local areas to develop opportunities for international inward investment, starting with Liverpool City Region and North East Combined Authorities, while the National Wealth Fund will build on its strengthened combined authority engagement to build a pipeline of investable propositions with mayors, starting with strategic partnerships in Glasgow City Region, West Yorkshire, the West Midlands and Greater Manchester. And sticking with Manchester, we are giving our support to the Mayor of Greater Manchester's plan for the redevelopment of Old Trafford, creating new housing, new commercial developments and a new stadium, but I'm advised to inform the House not necessarily government-wide support for the team which play there. I'm pleased to update the House, Mr. Speaker, on our new approach to the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor, a hugely exciting opportunity for the UK and the British economy. For centuries, these two cities have been synonymous with inspiration, invention and innovation. Economic analysis suggests that with the right support, the region could bring a GDP boost of £78 billion by 2035. Yet time and time again, governments have failed to capitalise on this remarkable area, most recently in 2021, when the last government dropped its commitment to what it called the Oxcam-ARC project. Through underinvestment, poor transport connections and a lack of affordable housing, the incredible growth potential of the area has been squandered, as people and businesses have been forced to move and invest elsewhere. No longer. Lord Vallance will act as our champion for the growth corridor, utilising his impressive experience in life sciences, academia and government to unlock growth opportunities across the region and promote its potential to investors across the world. And we will establish a new growth commission for Oxford to recognise and capitalise on the growth potential of this historic city. We already know, Mr. Speaker, of course, that transportation is a huge factor in the success of the country. Heathrow is the UK's only hub airport and the UK's largest air freight hub by volume, connecting us to emerging markets around the world, opening up new opportunities for trade and investment. But its growth has been constrained for decades. Today, we are announcing that the government supports and is inviting proposals for a third runway at Heathrow Airport to be brought forward by the summer. This is an important infrastructure project expected to have positive growth impacts across the United Kingdom and has the backing of businesses and business groups like the CBI, the FSB, and the British Chambers of Commerce, as well as trade unions like the GMB and Unite. According to a recent study from Frontier Economics, a third runway could increase GDP by 0.43% over the next 25 years. Over half, 60% of that boost would go to areas outside of London and the South East. It could create over 100,000 jobs in the local area and maintain Heathrow's status both as a global passenger hub and the UK's largest air freight hub by volume. Reforms that this government has introduced to speed up the planning system will ensure delivery of this project and will set it up for success. Once proposals have been received, the Government will take forward a full assessment through the Airport National Policy Statement to ensure that any scheme is delivered in line with our legal, environmental and climate obligations. We want the scheme to be value for money, and our clear expectation is that any surface transport costs associated with the project will be financed by private capital and should be sustainable and low carbon. The Secretary of State for Transport will also set out planning decisions for further airport expansion at Gatwick and Luton shortly. Crucially, I'm also pleased to announce that we are taking further steps in our transition to greener, cleaner aviation. At the start of this month, the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Mandate became law. Sustainable aviation fuel reduces carbon dioxide emissions compared to fossil jet fuel by around 70%. Today, we are announcing an additional £63 million for the Advanced Fuels Fund over the next year, and we've set out the details of how we will deliver a revenue certainty mechanism. These measures will support investment and high-skilled green jobs in plant across the United Kingdom, delivering sustainable aviation fuel here in the UK for UK consumption. Transportation is equally important on a local level, and this is as true for the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor as it is for anywhere else. So this government has confirmed that it will provide crucial funding for transport links, including upgrades to the A428 to reduce journey times between Milton Keynes, Bedford and Cambridge, and East-West Rail with new services between Oxford and Milton Keynes starting this year. We have already received submissions to the new Towns Task Force to build new developments along the new railway, and at Tempsford we will accelerate delivery of a mainline station on the East Coast Main Line so travellers can get to London in under an hour and to Cambridge in under 30 minutes once the East-West Rail has been delivered. And we will ensure, Mr. Speaker, that the pioneering work which has long been a hallmark of this area will continue. We are today committing to a new AI growth zone in Culham. We welcome Cambridge University's plan for a new flagship innovation hub in the centre of Cambridge and a new Cambridge Cancer Research Hospital as part of Wave 1 of the new hospital programme will be delivered. And just yesterday, Moderna completed the build for their new vaccine production and research and development site in Harwell while committing to invest £1 billion in the United Kingdom. Proof, Mr. Speaker, that when you create the conditions for success, businesses can lead the way. I am also pleased, Mr. Speaker, to confirm for the House that the Environment Agency is lifting its objections to specific developments in Cambridge. So we will press on with plans to develop 4,500 additional homes, new schools, office, retail and lab spaces in and around Cambridge. And in a further boost to the area, we have now agreed water resource management plans with water companies, unlocking £7.9 billion of investment in water resources in the next 5 years, including the new Fens Reservoir serving Cambridge and the South East Strategic Reservoir near Oxford. Mr. Speaker, this government has come in with a purpose, to bring growth and with it opportunity to the country. In just 6 months, we have taken the tough decisions to make that possible, and we are taking on the responsibility of a government that delivers real change for people. No longer the hollow promises of the Conservative Party, but change delivered under this Labour government. Working with business, working with local leaders to drive the growth that will lift up this country. Now, Mr. Speaker, we must go further and faster so that the next generation and the generation after that will have the opportunities that they deserve to ensure that Britain is strong and successful once again in a fast-changing world and so that everybody in this country can have the chance to succeed. Today's announcement, Mr. Speaker, will help to make that a reality and shows how our plan for change will build a better Britain, and I commend the statement to the House.
Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chief Secretary told us that growth is the #1 mission of this government, and he added, now we must go faster, which I have to tell him suggests a certain lack of ambition. What we do not need, Mr. Speaker, is some hasty manana moment of unquantified, vague promises of a better tomorrow. We need action now to reverse the grievous damage this Chancellor has wrought just in her first 6 months in office. So the first question I have is why did the government deliver a budget which the independent OBR said would lead to lower growth, higher inflation, higher interest rates and would cost jobs?
Exactly right.
And I have to tell the right honourable gentleman that going for growth in the 2030s means nothing to the businesses who have already stopped hiring, shed workers or put up prices thanks to Labour's ruinous policies. Mr. Speaker, it is hard to escape the conclusion that these announcements have been hastily cobbled together by a government which is under increasing pressure to change course but is seemingly incapable of doing so. So I ask the right honourable gentleman, why have these announcements only come now, when the Labour Party had years in opposition and had months in government leading up to its first budget? Now, Mr. Speaker, if the government really did want to unleash investment, innovation and the private sector, they should not have decided in the autumn to have substantially increased the tax burden and the size of the state. By doing so, far from encouraging private investment, they are actively squeezing it out. So can I ask the Chief Secretary to reassure businesses right now that there will be no further growth-destroying fiscal measures, including tax rises, in the spring statement? Mr. Speaker, is not the truth that the damage is already being done? That is the case even before the party opposite's tax rises bite in April. The economy is flatlining. That is happening right now. So I ask the right honourable gentleman, will any of these announcements actually have an impact within this Parliament? And what impact are they likely to have, if any, on the OBR's forecasts in March? Mr. Speaker, incredibly, the Chancellor said in her speech that businesses are what drive growth and the government should support them. Yet this is a government that has driven business confidence off a cliff, taxed it to the hilt, and through its upcoming employment legislation will be hitting them still further and with ever more job-destroying red tape. So can the Chief Secretary set out what the overall impact of government policy decisions since July has been on regulatory costs for businesses? And does he agree with the Business Secretary's extraordinary utterance on the media this morning that the government has not hammered businesses? The Chancellor claimed this morning she has seen no alternative suggestions from the opposition. Let me give her one now. Last year, the Conservative manifesto included £12 billion in welfare savings. At the time, the Labour Party said the money simply isn't there. Now we are told that the government will shortly be coming forward with plans for welfare reform, another Damascene conversion. Mr. Speaker, if they had grasped this issue when they came into office, they could have tackled the rising welfare bill rather than taxing jobs and killing growth. Their failure to act means that businesses and millions of people are paying the price. So can the right honourable gentleman today commit to matching that £12 billion? Or can he at least tell us the scale of savings we can expect from his promised reforms? Mr. Speaker, some of the announcements made today are of course welcome. The role of the opposition is not to oppose for opposition's sake, not least because many of the measures are reheated from the previous Conservative government. The plans on pension investment, for example, seem oddly familiar to us, probably because they were simply to continue the reforms that I was bringing in when I was Secretary of State at Work and Pensions. But even here, we must wait and see before passing judgment, because the fact of the matter is this government have shown we simply cannot trust their word. They promised not to raise taxes, they did. They promised not to cut winter fuel payments, they did. They promised not to borrow more, and they did. We need to see action, not just words. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor talks about removing barriers to growth. Oh yes, she talks about it. But this talk comes from the same person whose budget killed the economy and growth, stone dead. If we are looking to remove the greatest barriers to growth in this country, perhaps we should start with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Mel Stride there, delivering a brutal assessment of the government's plans for growth announced a little earlier by the Chancellor. Let's talk a little bit more about that and also reflect on PMQs with our political editor, Beth Rigby, who joins me now. And the criticism, the main bulk of the criticism from Mel Stride seemed to be, one, that the policies that the Labour Party have announced are not especially original, but two, that they aren't going to deliver growth quickly.
Yeah, look, the statement you just saw there is Darren Jones, who's effectively the number 2 at the Treasury, telling the Commons all of the things that Rachel Reeves announced in this speech that I think will be looked back at as one of the definitive speeches of this government, quite simply because if they do not get economic growth, they cannot deliver the public services that they have promised the public in the last election, and that's why this stuff really matters. But you're exactly right. What Mel Stride is arguing there is, in a way, the Conservatives will back many of these policies. It's about deregulation, it's about infrastructure, it's about building houses, many of which were policies that the Conservative government itself spoke about or wanted to implement. The criticism he has there is, point one, that the budget actually stifled investment, put up taxes on business, made businesses nervous. And you know that there's, even if publicly Rachel Reeves won't acknowledge that, privately there is an understanding in government that it was too gloomy and that that was potentially affecting not just business confidence but consumer confidence. So that was some of the criticism from Mel Stride there. But the other thing, the more important element of that, is he's saying you're putting in plans for growth that comes in the 2030s, but actually what you're implementing in the short term is not helping growth. And that is the big challenge for them. And what you saw in Prime Minister's questions was Kemi Badenoch honing in on the employment bill and workers' rights reforms, which business say will again stifle growth or harm growth potentially. So what you can see now are these dividing lines between a Labour government that is kind of nicking a load of Conservative policies actually in order to drive growth, and a Conservative government which will argue it's either contradictory or it's too long in the grass to actually bloom in this Parliament.
And what did you make of the exchanges between Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch? She seemed to lose her place at a couple of moments. And also Keir Starmer got a couple of zingers in. You're not a lawyer, you're not a leader. You could be the next lettuce, was one of the things he said to her.
Well, I mean, what she did was, and I thought this was interesting because she did this last week as well, instead of doing a scattergun approach, she honed in on one thing, which is the employment bill. This is about workers' rights. She said that this bill benefits trade unions. She asked him to drop elements of the bill that enhanced trade unions, saying it was a bill for trade unions, actually not for workers. And asked him to change it, said it would stifle growth and hurt business. There's a clear ideological divide there where the Conservatives have in the past as well criticised Labour for being on the side of unions, not the side of the consumer, be that rail strikes or now talking about employment protections or more powers for the unions, rather. So she had a clear line of attack, but you're right that Keir Starmer did get a zinger in where she said, your bill is terrible for business, but it's great employment for lawyers. I think we've got that exchange. Or have we?
We haven't got that, and we're just about out of time. But if you stay tuned...
Well, stay tuned, we're going to have it in a minute.
We'll maybe bring it to you in the next hour. Thanks very much for now, Beth.
Stay now.
Yeah, you're going to have to stay. You're watching Sky News Today. Coming up, more from Beth and all the latest as the Chancellor announces that the government is now backing a third runway at Heathrow Airport, plus expansions to Luton and Gatwick. Hello, you're watching Sky News Today with me, Jane Secker. It's 1 o'clock. These are the headlines. Breaking news, Lloyds Bank reveals plans to close 136 high street branches. Also this lunchtime, the controversial third runway at Heathrow Airport gets the government's backing in a bid to boost the UK economy.
That a third runway at Heathrow would unlock further growth, boost investment, increase exports and make the UK more open and more connected.
The decision was one of a number of measures announced by the Chancellor as part of a plan to open up opportunities for growth. Plus, dozens die and many more are injured in a crush in India as millions descend on the world's biggest religious gathering. The convicted criminals swapping jail time for the front line in Ukraine. We're with them. And a game changer in the diagnosis of dementia, the simple blood test that could revolutionise treatment. Hello, good afternoon. We start with breaking news. And Lloyds Banking Group has said in the last half hour that it plans to close 136 high street branches. The closures will affect its Lloyds, Halifax and Bank of Scotland brands. In a statement, a spokesperson for the bank says over 20 million customers are using our apps for on-demand access to their money, and customers have more choice and flexibility than ever for their day-to-day banking. They added, alongside our apps, customers can also use telephone banking, visit a community banker, or use any Halifax, Lloyds or Bank of Scotland branch, giving access to many more branches. Well, our business presenter, Darren McCaffrey, is here. Darren, more flexibility for customers, but possibly less flexibility if you're depending on the branch that's on your particular high street.
Yeah, indeed, and this is part of a trend, not just from Lloyds Banking Group, but we're indeed seeing it across the sector. Why is it? Let's be honest about this. Clearly, increasing numbers of customers, Jane, are using banking apps rather than having to deal with banks in person. I think Lloyds Banking Group was suggesting that the number of interactions with their actual physical banks is down some 55% in the last 5 years. So then it is maybe not a surprise that they are closing these 136 branches. Talk you through the figures. They are 61 branded Lloyds banks, 61 Halifax banks and 14 Bank of Scotland branches, and this will happen between May of this year and March of 2026. It should be added, this is on top of closures that have already been announced. Now, the good news is that this is not going to affect jobs in Lloyds Banking Group. Those jobs are going to be moved elsewhere within the company, and we've seen that in the past from Lloyds. But as you say, it will have an impact on those customers who do still depend on branches, particularly the elderly, when it comes to banking in this country. But frankly, the economic inevitability of this is clear to not just Lloyds, but in the entire banking sector. That, you know, for lots of us, and I speak this from a personal point of view, I mean, I can't remember the last time I went into a bank branch, and clearly millions and millions of Britons are now doing their banking online rather than in person.
Yeah. Darren, as we've been talking to you, another story to just get you to respond to, Tesco has announced cuts to 400 jobs across its stores. These are at its head office and its bakery, so not great news from the high street.
No, not at all, and this actually reflects a statement, very similar one that we saw from Sainsbury's last week, 3,000 jobs going in their cafe and bakery section and head office too. Now, I haven't seen the statement from Tesco, but I suspect, and we've heard this from business quite a lot in recent months, in part this may be due to the increases we've seen in, or we will see, in national insurance contributions for employers coming up later on this year, effectively a tax on employing people, if you like, and also that increase in the minimum wage, which many businesses have said, even big ones like Tesco, is going to cost them a lot of money that they might find unaffordable. And I think there are concerns. We heard this big speech from the Chancellor today. You've been talking about it, about economic growth. But many businesses feel that actually one of the barriers to growth has been those tax increases, if you like, which could see unemployment tick up this year. It's already on the rise, and I suspect That statement from Tesco, following on from Sainsbury's last week. And these are companies, Jane, by the way, that are doing very well, that had very good Christmas sales, that they may well continue to cut jobs as we go throughout this year. And that is not good for the government. And clearly, frankly, it's also not good for immediate economic growth.
Yeah, not good on the day that is all being announced. Darren, thank you very much for that. And another bit of breaking news we can give you away from the world of the economy. Princess Beatrice has given birth to a baby daughter, several weeks early, in fact, several weeks premature. The little baby, 4 pounds 5 ounces, called Athena, said to be healthy and doing well. Beatrice is, of course, the late Queen's granddaughter, and her husband. It's her second child. It was born on January the 22nd at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, and they have released this picture just gone up onto the royal family's social feeds. Already a little camera shy, it appears, a little mite, but the King and Queen have apparently been informed and are delighted. Beatrice and her daughter are now apparently at home, along with Athena's older siblings, Wolfie and Sienna. So that's Princess Beatrice, who's given birth to a baby girl a little prematurely, but doing well, and mum and baby are back home. Right, let's return to our other main story, the controversial third runway at Heathrow Airport that's been given the government support as the Chancellor said the expansion would bring growth and investment to the UK. Rachel Reeves gave a major speech earlier outlining her plans to try to boost the economy. We'll have more on her other announcements in just a moment, but first let's hear her comments on Heathrow.
I have always been clear that a third runway at Heathrow would unlock further growth, boost investment, increase exports, and make the UK more open and more connected. And now the case is stronger than ever, because our reforms to the economy, like speeding up the planning system and our plans to modernise UK airspace, means the delivery of this project is now set up for success. So I can confirm today that this government supports a third runway at Heathrow and is inviting proposals to be brought forward by the summer.
Well, in addition to backing Heathrow, Rachel Reeves also announced a raft of other measures. She said she would back plans by the Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham, for the redevelopment of Old Trafford, saying the move will create new housing and commercial development around a new stadium. The Chancellor also announced plans to work with local leaders to recreate South Yorkshire Airport City, describing it as a thriving regional airport. She also listed a series of transport and infrastructure projects around the so-called Oxford-Cambridge growth corridor, which she says has the potential to be the Silicon Valley of Europe. And there was also an announcement of nearly £100 million of National Wealth Fund investments in electric vehicle charging and raw materials used in renewable energy production. Well, let's bring in our political editor, Beth Rigby, who is here now. So a lot announced today and a key speech by the Chancellor after her first budget. But the criticism of it appears to be, what is she suggesting is not going to create growth quick enough.
There's so much to talk about, Jane, today, isn't there? There's the speech, there's Prime Minister's questions, there's a response in the Chamber as well from the Shadow Chancellor. But yes, this speech, I think, will be looked back on as a definitive moment for this government, and quite simply because I know it might seem quite dry around environmental deregulation and planning and judicial reviews, but what it's about is changing the economy and deregulating and bringing in what is called supply-side reform in order to try and unlock growth, and that will be by changing planning rules so you can build more homes, trying to fast-track a third runway at Heathrow, trying to build reservoirs, trying to develop the corridor between Oxford and Cambridge in order to drive economic growth. And all of it is about trying to grow the economy, quite simply because the government cannot keep taxing more and more and more. They have to have economic growth to improve tax receipts, to improve public services. So the whole of the Starmer project actually rests on economic growth. And this is the moment, if you like, after that budget of October 2024, which has landed very badly, and you are still seeing the reverberations of it, not least Tesco just now saying it's going to cut 400 jobs in its stores, Sainsbury's last week saying it's going to cut 3,000 jobs, you know, tax rises that have hurt business in the short term. And the big unknowable, as you point out, Jane, is when does this growth kick in and will it be quick enough? And the argument that the Conservatives were making today is that the government has stifled growth in the budget and put in measures that is actually hurting business now. And the growth regarding infrastructure investment that will come to fruition perhaps in the 2030s is not quick enough. That is the criticism. The government would argue that they have no option but to do this, that you will see cranes in the sky, you will see high streets changing, you will see town centres changing, you will see roads being built, and that will give the public faith that they are fulfilling their promises. So that's the calculation. The big question is, how quickly will people feel benefit? Rachel Reeves said in the Q&A when Ed Conway asked her this, she said by the end of this Parliament people should be feeling better off. The second big unknowable is whether or not they can really deliver it, because there's going to be so much opposition up and down the country, opposition from communities, opposition from politicians, opposition from Labour mayors, when these infrastructure projects get put in for green lighting.
Meanwhile, in Prime Minister's questions, Kemi Badenoch, apart from alluding to the fact that she sort of said that the Labour Party had nicked loads of Conservatives' ideas here, she chose to go on what she was calling the unemployment bill, but the workers' rights bill.
So what was also, in Prime Minister's questions, I mean, Kemi Badenoch had a bit of a difficult position in that a lot of the announcements that the government made are things that the Conservatives would either have tried to implement themselves or would support. But one area where she clearly sees there's clear ideological difference between Labour and the Conservatives is the employment bill. This is the package of measures that includes workers' rights. She didn't really go in on workers' rights. Obviously, that might be quite popular with lots of would-be voters out there who would like more protections at work. But what she did go in on are expansions, what she described it as the biggest expansion of trade union power in a generation within the employment bill. And she was specifically asking the Prime Minister, would he drop elements of trade that expand trade union protections or powers, would he drop those elements of the bill? She argued it would stifle growth. She said it's a bill that elements of it are terrible for business, but great employment for lawyers. And then they ended up having a bit of a spicy exchange around that, which I think we can listen in to.
This bill is terrible for business, but it is great employment for lawyers. I know the Prime Minister loves the legal profession, but he needs to stop being a lawyer and start being a leader. This is another measure in the bill that fails his growth test. Will he show some leadership and drop it?
Mr. Speaker, I understand she likes straight talking. She's talking absolute nonsense. She knows, and anybody who understands anything about the bill or any employment law will know you can't start in the morning and go to the tribunal in the afternoon. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know she's not a lawyer. She's clearly not a leader. If she keeps on like this, she is going to be the next lettuce.
It's not a bad line, that, actually. Bit of a dig at...
He looked quite pleased with himself.
He was very pleased. He's probably had that in his file for weeks, just waiting to unleash it, because he probably didn't write the joke or think of it on his feet. But Number 10 can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But the point being there, that he took a dig at Kemi Badenoch, and the lettuce, of course, refers to Liz Truss. Labour would like to keep talking about Liz Truss in perpetuity because it lands so badly with voters. Kemi Badenoch would very much like to turn the page on Liz Truss. But actually, some of the suggestions that the Labour government are now putting forward, the supply-side reforms, are things that Liz Truss was talking about. I think what's interesting about how Badenoch is now behaving in Prime Minister's questions, if you want the sort of political angle, is that last week it was all about education and what the Conservatives see as Labour putting more barriers on free schools and trying to intervene more and take more control in areas like education, and the Conservatives wanting a more free-wheeling approach because they think that benefits children and gives more choice to parents. And then this week she's again going in what she would see as an ideological dividing line of a Labour Party that is close to unions and a Conservative Party that wants to reduce union power. So she's finding dividing lines on policy. It's all a bit esoteric, I think, for the public, but you can see the building blocks she's put in place as she tries to build up a kind of area of, places that she can attack Labour on.
OK, Beth, thanks very much for now. Well, let's bring you some more breaking news. And state authorities in India say at least 30 people have now died and at least 90 others have been injured in a stampede at a huge religious festival. Images from the scene in Uttar Pradesh show bodies being stretchered away and rescuers helping those who were hurt. Our India reporter Neville Lazarus joins me now from Delhi. Neville, the numbers of dead creeping up here. It was 17 and it's now jumped to 30.
Well, it has quickened, and earlier we saw they were only talking about a dozen, but now we've got confirmation from the Deputy Inspector General of Police of the Mahakumbh Mela saying 30 people, at least 30 have died and over 90 injured. Now, we did know there were some very serious injuries when the Chief Minister in the morning mentioned this there, that the seriously injured have been taken to makeshift hospitals and could have gone to other specialist hospitals. This happened very early in the morning today when thousands, hundreds of thousands of devotees thronged the river banks to go for a dip, for the ritualistic dip in the Ganga. But they tried to reach a sliver of land which is called the Triveni Sangam, which is where the confluence of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna meet. It's a very narrow strip of land and it can only accommodate probably a few hundred people, but here you have thousands and thousands, and there were already many hundreds already on that bank when this surge happened. A stampede broke out. Devotees broke the barriers and tried to get to the river bank for their ritualistic dip. There was very little crowd control mechanisms. The administration has been criticised quite a bit on that out here in a number of by reporters and journalists and also people out there. And we've seen the end result of this, a really tragic incident. This is one of the biggest festivals, the biggest human gathering in the world. They are expecting about 400 million people at the end of this 45-day celebration of this Hindu festival. It comes once in 12 years, and this is a very special occasion. Today was an auspicious day, one of the 6 auspicious days in this 6-week festival. And a literal pop-up tent city has sprung up. There are over 160,000 tents pitched on both the banks of the river Yamuna and Ganga to accommodate these millions of devotees and pilgrims there. There's also 150,000 toilets being built. There are 400 kilometers of temporary roads, 200 kilometers of sewage lines being laid, fire stations, hospitals, all sorts of mechanisms of what a city would have has been constructed in this region. But obviously there has been lapses. There has been some sort of incompetence in terms of crowd control, even though 50,000 security forces have been deployed in this place. But nevertheless, it was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people who converged here. Today, the government mentioned they might have about 100 million people today and for tomorrow, and therefore these huge numbers. There were lapses today. And we've seen the results, and quite a dark day. And for those who have lost their loved ones and those who are injured, it is a terrible tragedy.
Neville, thanks very much. We're just getting a correction coming through to us from news agencies about the number of injured. We did say 90, but they are now saying it is, they've corrected themselves, they are now saying it is now 60 injured, but still a significant number of people injured in that stampede at that festival. We'll bring you more on that throughout the rest of the afternoon. Now, the Diocese of Liverpool has called for a further investigation into their bishop after misconduct allegations were made against him. The Right Reverend Dr. John Parambalath says he doesn't believe he did anything wrong after it emerged that 2 women made complaints. Let's talk to our correspondent Molly Malone for more on this. And Molly, what do we know about the allegations against him?
Well, it's certainly another difficult day for the Church of England, which has found itself surrounded in a series of allegations in recent months. The latest allegations centre around the conduct of the Bishop of Liverpool, John Parambalath, and what's basically emerged is 2 sets of allegations from 2 different women. The first woman, a senior woman in the church, has accused him of sexual harassment. It's understood that she made a formal complaint last year and told Stephen Cotterill, who of course is the Archbishop of York, currently leading the Church of England, back in 2023. The second allegation is an allegation of sexual assault from another woman within the church. She's accused him of kissing her without consent and of groping her. She alleges this happened between 2019 and 2023 while he was in his former job as the Bishop of Bradwell in Essex. He was, we understand, voluntarily interviewed by police, but no further action was taken. I should say that the Bishop strenuously denies these allegations. He's continuously denied these allegations. We've actually had a statement from him, from John Parambalath. He said, "Whilst I don't believe I've done anything wrong, I've taken seriously the lessons learned through this process, addressing how my actions can be perceived by others. I will comply," he said, "with any investigation deemed necessary." We've also had a statement from the Diocese of Liverpool saying, "We understand that some allegations against the Bishop of Liverpool have been investigated and found unsubstantiated by the National Safeguarding Team. We are aware the police in Essex have taken no action with regard to one allegation. However, we understand that an allegation of misconduct was not fully investigated, and we believe in the interests of justice that this should now happen." But we know that the crisis currently engulfing the Church of England is by no means extends far beyond this bishop. We've seen in recent months the Archbishop of Canterbury back in November stand down from his position after a damning report into the child abuser John Smith, who abused boys at Christian summer camps. The report said that the Church of England was found to be responsible for covering up that abuse. There's also been calls, it's worth saying, for the Archbishop of York, who's currently leading the Church of England, to stand down after revelations against him emerged that a priest at the centre of a sexual abuse case was twice reappointed under his leadership. So another difficult day for the Church of England as fresh allegations emerge about the conduct of senior figures within the Church.
Molly, thanks very much. You're watching Sky News Today. Coming up, the simple blood test that could revolutionise the diagnosis of dementia. We've got all the details.
Once almost lost, these denizens of the deep are back.
The problem for these whales is global warming. Water temperatures are rising.
We're worried that the animals are actually starting to starve.
Deadly and outdated. What do you think should happen to the nets?
I would like to see them go.
I'm Nicole Johnston, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Beijing.
A towering monument to the China dream and its demise.
From one end of this country to the other, China is littered with real estate that's falling apart.
China is facing a tsunami of the elderly.
We have to work as long as health allows, otherwise, no money.
China is under pressure to pay for the pensions of 500 million retirees. I've reported on a wide range of stories from around the world.
Mass protests forced the president to flee.
The sight of the president's private swimming pool only reinforces to Sri Lankans the great divide here between rich and poor.
Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child.
The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank.
These tunnels run all over Gaza. The Gaza Strip is ridden with them. A referendum designed to unite the country has only deepened its divide.
Sydney's floodplains underwater again.
This is the third or fourth time in 18 months that their homes have gone under.
Sky News, the full story first.
that may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology. This elite engineering designed to humour and to help us.
A simple blood test that could revolutionise the detection of dementia is being trialled in NHS clinics across the UK. Scientists say it could be a game changer in the treatment of the disease and hope it will allow people to secure an early diagnosis. Our science correspondent Thomas Moore reports.
Can you name these animals? Can you name this one?
Stephanie struggles with her words these days.
This one's a high, I cannot say it, no, I can't say that word.
Her mum had Alzheimer's disease and doctors think she may face the same problems with thinking and processing.
I just don't remember anything. It's just gone. I don't know if I could have some sort of tablets to take. If I take a tablet and that starts it and it keeps my memory keeping my brain really still, working and remembering.
Stephanie is now one of the first to take part in a new study of a simple blood test that could diagnose dementia in its early stages. The Blood Biomarker Challenge will look at a series of proteins thought to be hallmarks of different forms of the disease, including Alzheimer's. Several thousand patients will be invited to take part, with the aim of having an NHS-verified blood test within 5 years.
Just 2 in every 100 patients with Alzheimer's disease currently gets a formal diagnosis, either with a specialist brain scanner or a sample of fluid taken from their spines. The problem is, at the moment, the NHS doesn't have enough machines or trained staff, and that's why a blood test could make all the difference.
A cheap and accurate diagnostic test is all the more important now that new drugs can slow the progress of dementia. So far, they're too costly for the NHS, but more are coming.
There are a whole load of other drugs under development that are likely to come, be licensed and potentially available on the NHS over the next few years. Now, those drugs are suitable for people who have fairly early levels of memory impairment, so we need to get the diagnosis right to see if people are eligible and will benefit from those drugs.
Just under 1 million people in the UK have some form of dementia. Many wait years for a diagnosis, if they get one at all.
Dementia is the UK's biggest killer, and what we know at the moment is that many people are not getting a diagnosis. About a third of people in this country do not get a diagnosis. But the Blood Biomarker Challenge is about revolutionising the diagnostic pathway, and the blood test is a key part of that.
If you can copy this cube.
For patients like Stephanie, a proper diagnosis will help her to get support and perhaps future treatment to live well now and into the future. Thomas Moore, Sky News in Oxford.
Right, let's get a look now at the weather. The next few days look mainly fine, although not completely dry, but the northwest will turn wet and windy over the weekend. Most parts will be fine into the second half of the afternoon, with temperatures around average, but southern England will be quite cloudy with strong winds in the southwest and rain near the Channel. We can expect showers near northern and northwestern coasts as well. Rain in the south will take over more of the southeast later. Locally heavy near the coast, while the West Country will slowly dry up. Elsewhere, most places look fine, but there'll be a few showers near northern and western coasts. Shetland looks wet. Southern England will see rain clearing east overnight and the wind easing. Most other places look dry and clear with a frost forming, but we can expect some potentially wintry showers near northern and western coasts. Tomorrow is looking largely dry and sunny with early showers fading, but it'll be windy in the northeast for a time. Friday is going to be milder with overnight rain in the northwest, clearing across the southeast. You're watching Sky News Today. Coming up, the Chancellor announces her roadmap for economic growth. We ask whether her plans are likely to work.